Yeah.
the two sections that we're interested in hearing more about. So I'll turn it over to your chair.
Okay, and are we live? Now we are live. Terrific. So
Our official.
now we are official, and Senator Starr, thank you for inviting us. We're joint meeting with Senate Agriculture and Senate Health and Welfare, and it's really great to be here. Super. We do have a lot of common interests. I know, and as we go through our bills, we see relationships with agriculture. And this is one of those. So the PFAS bill that we currently have in committee, S-197, has two sections that we should probably go through together and get comments. So Mike O'Grady is going to go, well, thank you. And we'll go through the 6 and 7 with us, and then we have testimony from folks in agriculture. And next week, because of time limitations, we've scheduled some more testimony in our committee on these sections as well. But maybe we do it jointly and maybe not. See how it goes. Thank you.
So this is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. The two sections I have to review are short, but the context that I would like to provide is longer, a little bit more complicated. So there are two federal laws which generally regulate chemicals sold or used in the United States. One is for pesticides, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA, and the other is the Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA. So FIFRA regulates how pesticides are sold at the federal level, but FIFRA is also what's called a cooperative federalism program. Effectively, if a state meets certain standards, they get authorized to regulate the sale and registration of pesticides within their state. And Vermont is an approved cooperative federalist program for FIFRA. And what does that mean? Because many federal programs have what are called preemption clauses, and it says the states can only regulate to the extent that the feds allow the state to regulate. And FIFRA does have a preemption clause. So FIFRA's preemption clause has been held by the courts to solely be limited to the label of the pesticide. So basically, a state cannot change the label of a pesticide, change the approved use of a pesticide on the label, change the concentration amount for on the label, etc. But states can regulate the sale, distribution, and use of pesticides, including prohibition of a pesticide for use in a state. So that is FIFRA. States have significant authority under FIFRA. TSCA basically regulates all chemical products and how they are manufactured and approved for use in any product. TSCA has a preemption clause, but it is a weird preemption clause. And I don't even want to get into it. It takes me half a day to even understand it. But that preemption clause isn't at play here either. But there are provisions under both of those laws that EPA is implementing right now that may be instructive to you as you go forward with these two sections. First, a few years ago, maybe 2020, 2021, there was a study that was done of pesticides that discovered PFAS, those fluorinated compounds, in certain pesticides, and at levels that were concerning enough to raise issues about whether or not they should be continued to be used. Because pesticides, insecticides, it was actually mosquitocide, it was being dispersed through aerosol application, and They were concerned about basically the ambient deposition of that PFAS in soil, water, et cetera. So EPA did its own study, because the first study was from I think the Journal of Hazardous Materials. The EPA did its own study. And what they did is they studied the pesticide before it went into a container. Right? And they didn't find the PFAS in the pesticide because it hadn't been in the container. And what they concluded was that the original study had been testing PFAS that had been in, and had testing pesticide that had been in a container. And they concluded that the PFAS was leaching from the container and that the container had been made with fluorinated compounds. And so what EPA did, and they did it just recently, they prohibited the major manufacturer of those pesticides, mosquiticides, from producing or selling their product in containers that had fluorinated high density polyethylene. So EPA, at least for a certain classes of pesticides, has banned the container that includes PFAS or fluorinated compounds. A few years ago, they also banned certain pesticides that include PFAS. They banned 12 pesticides that included, they banned pesticides that included 12 different PFAS, but it's not the most common PFAS. So those most common PFAS could still potentially be in pesticides today. But that's different. Oh, that's different. Now, TSCA, the EPA just finalized a rule in October of 2023, and that rule will prohibit so basically what this does is it requires any manufacturer of a chemical substance to has to submit to EPA whether or not there is PFAS in that product. So there's already a requirement that if you're producing a chemical, like a pesticide, that has PFAS in it, that you have to notify EPA, and that went into effect in October of 2023. All right, so EPA is already banning containers for certain pesticides. EPA is already banning some pesticides that have PFAS in it. EPA under TSCA is already requiring reporting of whether or not that chemical has PFAS in it. And so that's important because when you look at section 7 of this bill, and remember, states can regulate pesticides, states can regulate toxic substances under FIFRA and TSCA. You're saying, page 10, line 10, a person shall not sell, offer for sale, use or distribute in the state a pesticide that has been adulterated in an amount exceeding 20 parts per trillion by the following PFAS. So, like EPA did, banning certain pesticides that have one of those 12 PFAS in it, you're going to ban the use and sale of pesticides that have one of the 6 common PFAS in it. So that is what's in your authority. Remember, preemption only applies to the label. You're not addressing the label. You're addressing the sale of pesticides that have a PFAS in it. And it can't be listed as an active, inactive, or inert ingredient. So basically, you are allowing some residual leaching, less than 20 parts per trillion, but it can't be an active or inactive or inert. Basically, it can't be intentionally. And then on page 11, that pesticides that do not contain PFAS as an intentionally added ingredient and that had been packaged with the fluorinated high density polyethylene, one of those containers that EPA has already banned for that one manufacturer, shall be tested for PFAS prior to sale, offer for sale, or distribution. The pesticide containing PFAS due to chemicals leached from the container in an amount exceeding 20 parts per trillion is prohibited from sale, offer for sale, use, or distribution. With the EPA action on that manufacturer and the concern about leaching, I don't think you're gonna see, I think you're gonna see manufacturers switch their packaging anyway. So I don't know if you're gonna trigger this that often, but you will at least have that, if it's gonna be in a container that has fluorinated high density polyethylene, they will have to report that and test that for the purposes of sale of that product in Vermont. That might limit some products from being sold in Vermont. Because if a manufacturer doesn't want to change their packaging, they might just decide not to sell in Vermont. So that,
How could they, if it's against the federal,
but the feds was only against one manufacturer. It was, yes, it was just in order that one manufacturer stop using the fluorinated compounds, not for all.
so the other manufacturers didn't take them to court or anything for, just picking on one?
I believe the name of the manufacturer is Enhanced Technology, enhanced with an I. Enhanced. And so,
So where might in ag, where might we find this product? What would it be used? Why would a farmer or an ag producer of veggies or whatever, what would they use this for? And what kind of product would they be?
well, I mean, it's interesting. It might be in a container of rodenticide, right?
It's the
container. It's the container might have leached that fluorinated PFAS into the rodenticide. It might be in other pesticides or insecticides or herbicides that a farm is using, because the containers can be discrete containers, but sometimes the containers are larger containers that a farm might be using.
A lot of times it's tote bag. Right?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So why would they put why would they put, I said PCB, PFAS into an herbicide or pesticide? What does it do? Because I think of it as such an agent for non-stick things, that sort of thing.
Well, that, I mean, in the packaging, it makes
But the
the
packaging,
material more pliable, right?
okay,
It makes it easier to mold, easier, and then the hardening, it hardens in a way that doesn't make it subject to fracturing when transported or used. And I don't know if it's intentionally added to pesticides. I do know that it's intentionally added to other fluids to kind of give it that sheen, that there's a word for it. Viscosity. The viscosity that's needed to have it move in a way
I'm
that's.
wondering about treated seeds, because they treat like a corn seed, piece of corn, they have to have it stick to the corn. And what we found is that the planter, is it's going through the so the planter, dust, that stuff breaks off and dust comes out. And so they're finding some PFAS in the dust. And of course that affects the bees and the pollinators and even the people around the planter. So we're trying to figure that out.
Well, that's the neonicotinoid pesticide that's concerned. If you heard that PFAS is in that dust as well.
No, we're trying to figure out if it is.
Right.
And if they're using that in there in the process of treating the seed to make it stick better to the seed, so you don't get that dust from that going through the. Right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Michael's, it seems like the federal focus was on the container. If the manufacturer switched containers to metal or
Something that didn't
Cardboard
have a
or-
coordinated
yeah.
compound.
would it still be banned federally?
So they didn't ban the pesticide. They told them that they couldn't sell that pesticide in a fluorinated container.
Okay, so if I am the manufacturer and I switch to a metal container, I can still sell the product?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but Senator Starr, you brought up a very interesting point on page 11, line 1. It says pesticides that do not contain PFAS as an intentionally added ingredient. Treated article seeds are not pesticides. Treated article seeds are a treated article. And that is, so when EPA regulates pesticides, they regulate it when it is used, when it is applied. And when you make a treated article, such as a treated article seed or like a telephone pole, you use the pesticide when that product is manufactured. So when at the seed plant, the pesticide is applied to the seed, or when at the telephone pole plant, the creosote is applied. And then because the pesticide, fungicide, whatever is being added to protect the product in its general distribution, EPA doesn't regulate. That's not a pesticide when it is when the telephone pole is used as telephone poles are, or when a treated article seed is used as a treated. EPA doesn't regulate. Vermont has the authority to regulate that because you gave yourself that authority about 5 years ago.
We just took it, you mean?
Yes, you are the only state that I know of that regulates treated articles or has the authority to. You haven't actually regulated any of them yet, but you have the authority to. You did request that the Agency of Agriculture with the Agriculture Innovation Board propose best management practices for the use of treated article seeds. That's not due until March of this year. So if you want to ban or you want to have a treated article notify you whether or not there's intentionally added PFAS in it, you have to say something more than pesticides. You have to, because a treated article is not a pesticide. But you might not want to just say any treated article because you probably are wearing treated articles. There's probably treated articles in this room. Your shoes, your underwear, your Gore-Tex, your et cetera.
Yeah, we'd all be probably nude if this was being off of the.
Let's not go there, please.
The,
So if you want to like, you probably want, if you're going to include treated article, you want to be specific about what treated article.
the issue that we're concerned about, we take in testimony. People misusing the product that if it was used properly, would be of no concern, but when they start taking it out of doors like it's in your bill, and then birds or pets or get into that rodent poison, it really causes a lot of grief for people that don't even think that it should be, well, it shouldn't be there to start with if it was used properly. And this is a little different area, but
So, I think Senator Hardy has a question, and then I think what would be helpful is to go through those two sections, 6 and 7, have Michael walk us through those two sections so we understand more fully what is possible or what is not possible. Senator Hardy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Your comment about the treated article, Michael, I'm sorry, it's a little awkward because I'm behind you, but I think I was on the ag committee when we did the treated article seeds bill in 2019 in the before days. I wonder how that interacts with the work that we've done on health and welfare, because we did a bill about, it might be over in the House, but it's a bill about treated like textiles and two bills. We've
One that's
done a
finished
couple
and
on
one that's still there, right?
PFAS, but
Yeah.
in terms of your comment about it could be clothing. I think we had definitions in those bills that related to clothing and textiles and outdoor gear and all those
Part of
things.
it.
And so is there a different definition for treated articles?
So PFAS is not a pesticide. And treated articles are those articles that have been treated with the pesticide for the protection of that product.
Okay,
So when you're banning PFAS in fabric material, it doesn't overlap with the treated article authority, because treated articles is about where pesticides. I'm using pesticides in
broad sense, yeah.
Side, but that's what pesticides have been used to protect that product.
Okay, so I was just concerned
No,
with
it's-
your comment about the clothes.
It's not, well, right, there are pesticides, it's usually a fungicide that is in a lot of clothing.
Oh,
Your silver biocide thread, your other treatments for fungal or bacterial growth is on your clothing.
and is that considered a treated article
That's a
in the
treated-
sense of the same sense as seeds?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Bamboo.
Wow, that's really creepy. I had no idea that we had that in our clothing. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're clear about the definitions of what articles are and clothing and tech, all that stuff. So
Yeah, so that's maybe a good time to go through the 6 and 7 to help us, that with those definitions and others.
So, section 6 starts on page 8. You are amending the definition section in one of the chapters of Title 6 that relate to pesticide regulation. And you are adding on page 10 two definitions. One, the definition of perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, as a class 4 chemicals containing at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom. And that's how you define PFAS in Title 18. Other definitions of PFAS in statute are specific to the common PFAS substances, but this is a broader application, and I think, quite frankly, because there's thousands of PFAS, this is more comprehensive and meets your intent better than other definitions in statutes. And then there's a definition of intentionally added as the addition of a chemical in a product that serves an intended function in the product component. And then you come to section 7, there would be a new section added in the pesticide control chapter, specifically labeled, the section will be labeled PFAS and pesticides. Page 10, you'll see a person shall not sell, offer for sale, use, or distribute in the state pesticide that's been adulterated. That term adulterated is unimportant, so I'll bring that up in a minute. In an amount exceeding 20 parts per trillion by the 6 specific and most common PFAS substances. And then you'll see page 10, line 19, a pesticide shall not contain a substance listed in the subsection as an active, inactive, or inert ingredient. So if it's an active, inactive, or inert ingredient, it was intentionally added to that product. It is not an adulteration of that product. But you cannot put those substances in it intentionally. So that brings you to page 11, line 1, pesticides that do not contain PFAS as an intentionally added ingredient and that have been packaged with a fluorinated high-density polyethylene container shall be tested for PFAS prior to sale. If it contains PFAS due to chemicals leaked from the container in an amount exceeding 20 parts per trillion, it is prohibited from sale, offer for sale or distribution in the state. So that's, I think you're gonna see industry eliminate those containers. So this subsection might not come into play that often, but it will be basically a foundational requirement to prohibit those containers, or at least incent manufacturers to not have fluorinated high density polyethylene containers. That brings you,
Should that section sunset at a given time? If it's gonna be dealt with at the federal level? So,
I think that's an opportunity for you. You do have in statute prohibitions that are similar or the same as federal prohibitions, like DDT. DDT is prohibited, it's prohibited at the federal level. You didn't sunset that.
just leave it on the book.
You can leave it on the books, right?
Yep.
Page 11, line 7, manufacturers and distributors of pesticides shall submit a confidential statement of formula for each pesticide or pesticide product registered with the state. Now, remember, I told you already that chemical manufacturers under this new TSCA rule are required to submit to EPA information about their chemical, including its common trade name, its chemical abstract index name. In addition, basically the identifiers in it and whether it's PFAS is in it. So this is not the same as the TSCA rule, but it's substantially similar. So people, manufacturers are going to argue that this is beyond your authority. I do not think this is beyond your authority. You're asking for factual, non-confidential, non-controversial information. You're asking for the ingredients / formula of the product. I think that's important to know. You might hear from manufacturers that this is too much of a disclosure requirement, but I think it is so similar to the new TSCA requirement as to really eliminate that argument.
There's a difference, major difference, so between the manufacturer and the distributor. Because, you know, you may have a manufacturer out in the Midwest, but if, you know, a local Bordeaux Brothers sells this stuff, I would think they would be considered a distributor. Well, you know, the local guy isn't gonna have that knowledge and shouldn't be burdened with reporting something that the manufacturer has already reported, because when he gets their license, they must have to report them.
So I think you have opportunity to address that issue, because any pesticide that's used in the state has to be registered annually with the state. So by the manufacturer.
Yes,
So you could say that this disclosure requirement is at time of registration by the manufacturer.
yeah, the distributor, I mean, I don't see the purpose of burdening of a small business here in Vermont. The distributor should probably be eliminated and put the wording that Michael just suggested in.
Just one question about that. So suppose a manufacturer is sending this in a bulk, in a tank truck or train somehow. And then the distributor is packaging I mean, does that make any difference? No,
It,
not with this. Yeah.
right, and I understand your
Yeah.
point, but the manufacturer, even to have it distributed into the state,
Yeah.
has to have the prior registration. And because on page 11, lines 9 through 13, you're making that formula exempt from
Got it.
public inspection and copying, it should go to
Should.
the regulatory agency, and so they keep it, they know. For purposes of enforcing the prohibitions that you already reviewed. Page 11, line 14, that's just how the manufacturer would submit the form. It's gonna be a form provided by, the agency during registration. It will state whether the pesticide has ever been stored, distributed or packaged in chlorinated high-density polyethylene. The secretary shall specify the format for submission. And any notice shall contain certain specific information. It's whether the name of the intentionally active chemicals in the pesticide, description of the product or product components containing PFAS, the amount of the chemical contained in each unit of the product or product component reported by weight in parts per trillion, the name of the manufacturer of the product, as in the name of the contact person for a manufacturer, and any other information manufacturer deems relevant. There should probably be any other information the secretary requires for the manufacturer deems relevant. The act takes effect July 1, 2024, except that the restrictions, section 6 and 7 take effect on January 1, 2025. This bill was partly informed by efforts in Maine to basically ban PFAS in all products. The Maine program has a slightly attenuated effective date. They're looking at 2030 to eliminate all PFAS, but beginning January 1, 2022. I'm sorry. It's January 1, 2030 for a pesticide that contains essentially added PFAS. So this would be well before that main prohibition.
But that,
Got two questions, that place,
So first question is, how do you enforce it? Because which agency is gonna be responsible? And what are the consequences? I know a farmer who had a pond, Vermont banned certain herbicides, so to keep the weeds down in his pond, he just went to New York State and bought it. So, you know, there's gotta be consequences. The other thing is if we have a hazmat, well, in Rutland County that goes around once or twice a year, pick it up, and they see that stuff and they say, no, we can't take that. Well, people got it in their stores, in warehouses right now, what are they gonna do with it?
So, great questions. First question, because all of these products need to be registered with the Agency of Agriculture. The Agency of Agriculture is the enforcing entity, and they do enforce misuse of pesticides, including pesticides that are not appropriately registered or registered in the state for the use that somebody misuses them for. And the prime example of that is from Rutland. And when a motel owner used a banned pesticide for control of insects within that motel, the agency enforced against that person, and there was a significant enforcement penalty. So that's who would enforce. And they do enforce for misuse, including bringing pesticides in from out of state that are not approved in Vermont. Second question. The pesticides are, your local hazmat collection might have denied the pesticide collection. especially from, in a large container or from a farm. Because there's already a program that the Agency of Agriculture runs for, effectively the collection of those. However, they usually implement that program by paying the solid waste management entity
Right.
to collect those. So I'm not really sure why a pesticide or a pesticide container was not collected by your solid waste management. It may be the deal that your solid waste hauler has or entity has with the agency. So it might require me to do a little bit more sleuthing before I can get to that question.
Just another example is, cause I was on the select board in my town, so we dealt with, people bring up their, fluorescent light bulbs. No, we're not permitted to accept those, so the people are like, well, what do I do with it?
That's true, the landfill, the dump is not permitted to accept them. But,
So,
and it sounds like they're not a collection point,
Right,
right? So you would just need to find, and this is more simply said than done. To find a collection point, in your area for those bulbs. There's supposed to be at least two per county.
okay, thank you.
Senator Weeks.
Yeah, the Rutland hazmat center takes all that. And, my question is, so you highlighted the difference between Vermont and Maine's implementation date. Is there anything you can offer on the logic why there's a 5-year spread between the two? And is there something that Maine knows that we're not reacting to?
No, I don't think so. I think it's probably the other way around. So, Maine enacted their bill in 2021.
they've had an awful bad.
And since then, there's been a lot of effort. 2019. Since then, there's been a ton of effort at the federal level, nationally, among states, to regulate PFAS, and the concerns about PFAS are growing. And so I think there's a more accelerated response, both at the federal level and in states, than when Maine enacted its laws.
Okay, because I remember in the garments, PFAS garments bill, there was a recognition that vendors have to move through stock and and that caused the implementation to spread out.
You have similar concerns here. You probably want to talk to some of the distributors, vendors, even the agency about use. Farmers might have it on site. Thanks.
So did you make a note of the committee on up in 112, adding on any other requirements the secretary might deem necessary or,
Sure.
and then
And the district.
the other question, I guess we already talked about that. But you know, by the time we get this bill worked through the system, it'll probably be May or June. And so the date of January 1 of 2025
Early.
will only be 6 or 7 months away. And maybe that should be backed out to 26 or something so that everybody can get geared up and plan on. I don't know if you have what the other membership. I think, I just raised that as a question that you might want to consider.
Just a really quick one. Where did the threshold of 20 trillion parts come from?
I believe that
EDC, Department of Health.
It's been a while since I actually drafted this.
I'm sure you didn't make it up.
I'm gonna go back and check my notes.
From somewhere.
Figured out how high you could count and said that's high enough.
I think that's a good thing.
Federal-
I won't, yeah, no.
I'm gonna have to confirm,
Okay.
sorry.
I believe the federal level was 70.
Yeah,
And Vermont is one of the only states that,
we set
Yeah.
ours lower.
yeah,
And that was through Elkhart, a while ago.
So have we figured out, or Jared maybe talked about what products that involve ag, that this would involve this bill would.
The containers,
Well, it's
crossovers. containers.
pesticides.
That's
Do you get water bottles included in that?
not in this one. I'm trying to have a look at the
Bottles
front of
Everybody
the,
wants to carry it. I'd be concerned about those things.
Yeah, we have schools with no potable water and they're relying on plastic bottles to.
No chocolate, or the glass or pipes.
So I would recommend that you talk to Steve Dwinell at the agency about how this will affect what's sold to farmers.
Because what we would do is rank it through the innovation board and get, you know, some pretty intelligent people in here that study this stuff.
okay.
So
We had a list of folks that we were thought were invited today, so including Steve Donnell. But so we'll have to sort out how best to go forward with.
Steve is on.
He's on. Oh, okay. Steve is on.
Steve's on,
And Pam Breyer is on.
Oh, okay.
so
And also had invited Pam Breyer. I had a memo, I had a note from the ag agency about offering their testimony and having it on, so if you want to hear them, they're here.
well, yeah, I'm 12 or 14.
Or today Friday, yeah, so we'll have to ask them to come back. I keep forgetting.
And it's bad to ask a witness and then cut them off.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. You're absolutely right.
And then probably other people that would like to be heard.
Okay, so why don't we chat? We can wrap for the day, so.
Unless there's questions from. We can.
Brian, you okay?
I'm good. You could always call on that one.
Oh, I had the wrong,
It's a Brian Square.
I had the wrong Brian C. The,
I think that's it. This is really helpful. We kind of, I think working together is good. We'll talk about who takes what testimony when and how we might schedule together going forward. I think it's important for us to hear the ag side of the equation and it's important for you to hear the public health side of the equation.
well, you know, I mean, farmers health.
Yeah,
No, we gotta keep them healthy.
exactly. Totally.
But for individuals, no, this reminds me of my days, in the health and the ag committee of 11. You know,
Oh.
Committee of 10, or something better, it's right up there. No, thank you, Madam Chair. Hosting this.
This is a good room for us too. huh?
could I ask a question? Do you mind?
Well,
Well, we've got a question from
One more-
Senator Williams.
Go ahead.
I just wanna go back to my, solid waste district picking up light bulbs or the transfer station being able to accept them. In this age where we're trying to limit, emissions for combat global warming. It doesn't make any sense for every citizen in a town to have to go to Rutland. To get rid of their, and we need to put a mechanism in there so that the state has the ability to pick those up. And make sure that people could be permitted to do that. And so we take one truck instead of 500 to go to.
Yeah, Steve Drenell was probably on there. Steve, are you on there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry,
a
I'll mute.
little bit about the pickup of these hazardous products that we're talking about. How, I know you guys, I think the agency runs a pickup for them.
Right, right. Well, we have two programs, I guess, are pertinent. One is we have we cooperate with a nonprofit called the Agricultural Container Resource Council that Agricultural Container Recycling Council, excuse me, that picks up pesticide containers that are properly cleaned at no charge to applicators and dealers, and we do that annually. And then we also work with the solid waste management entities to defray the cost of their pesticide disposal. We have a series of contracts with them and specifications on how they do it. And the Swimmies either have a fixed facility where they collect material, and then a contractor comes and picks it up, and then they submit an invoice and reimburse them, or they hold collection events and do the same thing basically. But yeah, we have a program that collects or helps pay for the cost of disposing of the pesticides that are disposed.
So that might help you, Senator.
So
So
my point is that if you got a line of people that are waiting at the transfer station for them to pick up, and then you say, sorry, we can't take that, or no, right over the roadside.
yeah,
So
Well-
somebody needs to be
that
designated
doesn't
as,
happen in Orleans County.
and there needs to be funding available.
I don't know about that.
There needs to be funding available to that agency so that they can implement it.
Well, I mean, that's the intent of the program, and I can't give you the numbers right now, but we do, collect a lot of pesticides through that program. So maybe if you could, I can reach out and you can tell me about the specific situation you're talking about. We can find out what's going on there, but there is a program.
Yeah, and there is no charge, right, for
Right. Well,
subs, so.
qualify a little bit. There's no charge for household hazardous waste, households dispose of pesticides. If there's a larger amount and the generator meets what qualifications called a conditionally exempt small quantity generator, technical term, then they may be charged a small fee. So for example, if a pest control company or a farmer comes up to a facility and they have like a 50-gallon drum, they can collect the drum, but they may charge them a little bit for that large quantity, that size material.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure. Thank you.
It's great, good.
So.
Oh.
Yeah, I just had a quick question as it pertains
Can you
to.
state your name for the record?
Oh, my name's Caleb Teskey. I'm a freelance investigative journalist from Morrisville. My question pertains to trade secret laws and chemical formulations. I know a lot of these bigger companies, Dow and DuPont, those type of companies are not always required to disclose all the ingredients of their formulations. And a scary number of these products are covered by these trade secret laws. And I'm curious, along with the enforcement angle that you were talking about, how are you going to, first of all, how are you going to test for all these chemicals? There's, as he said, there's thousands of different PFAS. It seems like Vermont's testing for maybe the top 5 or 6 or whatever it was. So I'd be curious if there was a way for these
You've
companies.
opened up a whole area, and some of it we haven't had discussion about in our committee, so thank you for the question
Cool.
at the end of the meeting, and we are gonna close, but it's something that we can engage our lawyer
I'll
with.
be back Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking that.
Yeah, no,
Appreciate
thank you. Terrific.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
All good?
All right.
Thank you.